Hey guys, tonight we slowly wander into the hushed corners of the Palace of Versailles, where the kitchens whisper stories of meals long past. The halls stand silent now, but if you lean in close enough, you might sense the faint trace of footsteps, the echo of ladles, the rhythm of careful preparation. Versailles was not always this grand. It began as a hunting lodge before Louis XIV transformed it into a royal palace of extraordinary size and splendor. You can imagine that kind of renovation bill today. You would probably have to sell every snack in your cupboard just to afford one golden doorknob. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you are at it, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step across the threshold with care, where rough stone softens into polished wood, and the air alters as though it has been waiting. Coolness rises, silence folds itself around you, and the place exhales in a hush that feels alive with expectation. This quiet is not empty. It leans toward you, as if the walls themselves listen for the cadence of your steps. Already you sense that the palace is more than grandeur preserved in gilding and stone. Versailles carries memory within its walls, a rhythm of centuries that still pulses faintly. It did not achieve such magnificence at once. Louis XIV, the Sun King, expanded it with vision both practical and theatrical. He layered courtyards over courtyards, rituals upon structures, until the palace became both residence and stage. Its growth was not brute construction, but patient unfolding, like fabric folded crease by crease, until symmetry revealed itself. Your gaze follows the corridor where pale stone drinks the shadows. Stillness saturates the space, but not the stillness of vacancy. It hums with echoes of countless lives. You imagine the kitchens that once roared below. Firelight, commands shouted above clatter, a metallic chorus of copper pans. That noise is gone, dissolved into whispers that brush only the edges of thought. For an instant, you expect the scurry of shoes over flagstones, but nothing stirs except your measured breath. History here stretches like a slow exhale. Versailles was never simply a home. It was performance. Louis XIV designed it as theater, where courtyards, galleries, and chambers all played their roles in the choreography of monarchy. Yet within this drama, subtler details endured. Records tell of passages that remained cool regardless of season. While glittering rooms sweltered in summer, these narrow corridors breathed a steady chill. Was it design, accident, or mystery woven into stone? The answer escapes you, but the thought brings a smile. Versailles, centuries ahead, offering its own quiet invention of natural air conditioning. The hush leads you farther. Each step feels deliberate, almost ritual. Light from high windows drips in pale lines, softening the stone, making edges blur into gentleness. Shadows stretch long and patient, remembering the rhythm of countless feet. Here, time does not press forward. It bends, slowing to your pace. Your mind loosens into pauses, like silence that shapes the music between notes. You imagine Versailles in its height, kitchens blazing, carts rattling through courtyards, voices rising with dawn. Attendants wove through their endless duties, each movement a thread in the tapestry of ritual. Yet even then, you suspect, some corridors offered sanctuary. Perhaps a young servant, breathless from labor, slipped into the cool hush, leaning against the stone while feigning an errand. The image makes you smile, as though across centuries you have caught them in their moment of reprieve. Even amid magnificence, small human needs demanded space. Lingering, you notice more. A faint scent of old wood lingers, like smoke long extinguished but not forgotten. The stone floor carries coolness into your body, steady and grounding. Your hand grazes the wall, where centuries of touch have left uneven textures, roughness in some places, polished smooth in others. These marks are records as tangible as parchment, history pressed into surface by the living. You pause near a window. Beyond it, courtyards lie blurred in haze, their outlines softened like a memory wrapped in gauze. You imagine them alive at dawn, wheels clattering, horses snorting, voices calling. Now silence spreads, leaving the scene for your mind to complete. For a moment, you hold both times together, the bustling past and the softened present layered like shadow against light. As your eyes adjust, subtler details reveal themselves. A lintel carved above a doorway, edges worn by centuries. A patch of darkened stone, polished by countless brushes of passing hands. A faint draft curling low at your ankles, as though the palace itself draws a breath. Beauty here is not spectacle, but endurance, details that persist for those patient enough to see. You step again, and your footfall echoes faintly, stretching into the hush until it doubles the length of the corridor. Silence magnifies distance, turning space into memory. Somewhere far below, the kitchens once blazed with heat, but here the air remains protective and calm. You wonder if those who hurried through noticed the same stillness, or if their tasks denied them the pause you now take. Some may have lingered. Most, perhaps, never had the chance. The thought makes you smile. Where they rushed, you slow. Where duty pulled them onward, time now walks with you. Versailles no longer feels only like a monument to kingship. In these corridors, it becomes companion, offering coolness, silence, and space to reflect. Each passage holds its stories, but waits without demand, patient as an unopened book. Deeper you walk, listening to the language of stillness. Shadows shift, air stirs lightly, and silence guides you with a gentle hand. You breathe in, steady and full, and exhale with a soft smile. In that rhythm, understanding comes. You are not only exploring a palace, not only tracing centuries through stone. You are walking through patience itself, patience, embodied in shadow, in air, in walls that keep their secrets until you are ready to hear. The first light of dawn stretches carefully across the stones, touching each surface as though it knows not to hurry. You step into a courtyard paved in patterns of cobblestone, every piece fitted by hands long gone, yet still holding steady. The air is cool, faintly damp with the softness of morning, carrying the scent of dew clinging to hidden patches of grass. You pause, taking in the quiet order, where nothing feels rushed, and everything seems content to unfold at its own rhythm. The kitchens of Versailles were not simply attached to the palace like an afterthought. They were designed with intention, placed slightly apart from the main halls to reduce the risk of fire spreading to the heart of royal life. This separation gave the courtyards their purpose, linking utility with safety and turning space into both passage and pause. It is a detail that reminds you how grandeur is never just about spectacle, but also about careful planning. Even the Sun King, wrapped in golden light, needed his meals to arrive safely. You smile, thinking of how today even your toaster has a safety label. You notice how the stones themselves reflect the light differently, some glowing pale, others shadowed into soft gray. The morning air makes the colors shimmer, shifting with each new angle. Your footsteps are slow, measured, echoing faintly against the walls that enclose the courtyard. The sound is neither loud nor sharp, but gentle, as though softened by centuries of repetition. You imagine countless feet crossing here, cooks, servants, messengers, each stride absorbed into the rhythm of the stone. As the light deepens, details emerge. The doors lining the courtyard, each one leading to another hidden passage, another tucked-away chamber, stand quietly closed. Some seem ordinary, their wood darkened by time, while others have a subtle weight, as though they hold more than just entry. Records mention that many of these doors led to small corridors branching like veins from the kitchens, but not all have been fully traced. Even today, architects admit that some doorways lead into mysteries, paths that fade into uncertainty. The palace seems to enjoy, keeping a few of its secrets tucked quietly behind wood and stone. You pause at a doorway, fingertips tracing the wood worn uneven by countless hands. Smooth patches mingle with rough grain, each a quiet record of passage. You imagine those who once crossed here servants with baskets of herbs, trays of silver, or warm loaves just pulled from ovens. Some doors must have been shortcuts to the dining halls, others secret paths for the initiated. You smile at the thought of a new attendant, lost in the maze, rescued by a cook's gentle guidance. The courtyard itself is not grand in the way of Versailles mirrored halls, but its simplicity carries its own elegance. The geometry of stone, the proportions of walls, the balance of openings and closures, it all breathes order. Even the way light filters in feels deliberate, as though morning was invited to enter at a specific angle. You imagine the first workers arriving in these hours, their breath visible in the cool air, their movements steady and purposeful. Though the palace above glittered in gold, life here began with the hum of work, grounded in stone and silence. You notice how sound travels in this space. A small movement echoes broadly, while the softer rustle of fabric seems to disappear into walls. It is a space designed not just for passage, but for rhythm. Each door, each step, each pause contributes to a gentle choreography. You breathe in slowly, feeling yourself part of that pattern, even if only in imagination. The courtyard, though empty, feels full of presence, as though it remembers every hand, every footfall, every moment of anticipation before meals. The doors stay in your thoughts, their mystery enduring. Old records speak of hidden passages, stairways that twist unexpectedly, and exits absent from any plan. Some say they were built for servants, moving unseen, so meals appeared like magic. Others think they served as secret escapes in fire or unrest. Whatever their intent, not all have been found again. Even now, centuries later, Versailles keeps corners of uncertainty. It is strangely comforting to know mystery still breathes within its stones. Your eyes return to the stones underfoot. Each one seems worn, smoothed by centuries of passage, yet resilient, ready to carry more. The pattern stretches outward, a quiet grid that has supported countless mornings like this one. You imagine carts rolling across, the iron wheels creaking softly, the occasional clatter of wood against stone. Birds might have perched along the walls, observing the bustle, their song weaving into the morning hum. Today, only silence greets you, a silence filled with texture, thick with memory. The sun lifts higher, spreading warmth slowly. Shadows stretch and retreat, painting the courtyard in soft layers. You find yourself lingering, unwilling to rush forward. This space, with its balance of stone and light, feels like a pause in the flow of time. The doors remain closed, yet their presence speaks of unseen paths, lives, and labors that once flowed constantly. You breathe deeply, allowing the air to fill your lungs, cool and steady, like a gentle reminder that not all mysteries need answers. Some can simply be companions. The courtyard becomes a meditation. Every surface invites attention. The uneven stones, the faint marks of chisels long ago, the quiet lines of architecture holding order. You sense that patience is woven here, not in spectacle, but in the rhythm of dawn itself. This was where the day began, where workers entered, where light first touched the palace kitchens. The grandeur of Versailles may rest in gilded mirrors and endless halls, but its life began here, in courtyards of stone, where the first breath of morning shaped the day ahead. You linger in this pause, knowing the journey continues, but grateful for the stillness. The doors, the stones, the silence, they are all part of the story, unfolding slowly, one breath, one step, one detail at a time. And as you prepare to leave this courtyard, you carry with you the image of light on stone, doors leading into mystery, and the quiet hum of a palace that still whispers through its walls. The morning deepens as you follow the path from the courtyard into a smaller, warmer space. The coolness of stone fades, replaced by a gentle wave of heat that greets you before you even see its source. It is not a harsh fire, but a steady warmth, the kind that comes from ovens already awake. You pause at the threshold and breathe in, and suddenly the air is filled with a fragrance so comforting that it almost feels like a memory. It is the smell of bread rising. The first smell of bread is unlike anything else. It carries with it not just the scent of flour and yeast, but the promise of nourishment, the suggestion of safety, the reminder that the day has begun. Here in Versailles, bakers rose before dawn, often while the palace still slumbered, to prepare fresh loaves for the royal family. Each day required consistency bread that was soft yet structured, warm yet delicate enough to be enjoyed alongside the refined meals of the court. You imagine the bakers shaping dough in silence, their hands dusted with flour, their movements as natural as breathing. If anyone invented a candle with this exact fragrance, people might skip dinner and just inhale instead. The ovens themselves stand in quiet strength. Their mouths are dark yet alive with ember heat, lined with stone that holds warmth deep within. The crackle of firewood mixes with the faint hiss of steam rising from loaves. You hear the gentle thump of dough being set upon wooden paddles, the soft rustle of cloths used to cover trays, the muted shuffle of feet on the floor. The rhythm of baking is slow but steady, a pattern repeated countless times. You imagine how, for the bakers, this was not just labor but ritual, a way of greeting each day. The smell grows stronger as more loaves rise and crisp in the heat. The air becomes layered with notes both sweet and earthy, almost like roasted nuts mingling with warm grain. It is the sort of fragrance that could anchor a wandering mind, holding attention without demand. You realize that bread, though simple, has always been more than food. It has been a symbol of stability, a measure of wealth, and at Versailles, even a mark of luxury. To provide fresh bread daily for the royal household required not only skill, but also organization on a grand scale. History tells us that the bakers of Versailles were highly valued. Bread was not merely an accompaniment, it was essential to the rhythm of meals, the foundation upon which other dishes could rest. The royal family expected freshness, texture, and perfection in every loaf. Bakers worked under pressure, yet their work unfolded in this quiet, fragrant space, shielded from the glittering eyes of the court. You find it almost amusing to think that while Louis XIV staged ballets and orchestrated elaborate ceremonies, someone nearby was quietly checking whether dough had risen enough. Yet, among the many loaves, there were whispers of something more mysterious. Records suggest that a particular type of bread was prepared only for Louis XV. Its exact recipe was never fully revealed, and the details have faded into uncertainty. Some believe it was richer, perhaps made with fine butter or flavored with delicate herbs. Others think it might have been shaped in a distinctive way, meant to signal his unique place in the royal lineage. The truth remains elusive, like the smell of bread that lingers but can never be captured fully in words. You smile at the thought that even in a palace overflowing with luxury, a loaf of bread could carry its own aura of secrecy. You picture the trays lined with finished loaves, their crusts golden, their surfaces crackling gently as they cooled. Steam rose in invisible waves, filling the air with warmth. The bakers worked quietly, arranging loaves with care, making sure that each one was ready to be carried into the labyrinth of corridors leading to the dining rooms. Perhaps a young apprentice, still new to the craft, marveled at the smell just as you do now, breathing in with wide eyes before being nudged back to work by an older hand. The fragrance that surrounds you now would have been the same fragrance that greeted countless workers then, a link across centuries. The soundscape of this space adds to the calm. The low murmur of fire, the faint squeak of wood, the occasional clink of trays, all blend into a rhythm that feels steady, almost like a lullaby. You walk slowly past the ovens, letting your senses linger on each detail. The warmth against your skin, the flower floating gently in the air, the glow of embers soft as fading stars. The space feels alive, but not restless. It breathes like a creature at peace with itself. The bread is not yet on your tongue, but it fills your imagination. You think of the first bite, the contrast between crust and crumb, the softness yielding under pressure, the warmth spreading across the palate. Bread has always carried something universal, a comfort that transcends status. Yet here, in the kitchens of Versailles, it became something refined, measured to meet the standards of kings. You chuckle softly, imagining Louis XV pausing mid-conversation at breakfast to say, "This loaf is just right," as though that were the highest compliment a monarch could bestow. As you step back, the fragrance follows you, lingering in your hair, your clothes, your memory. The smell of bread rising is not just a detail of history. It is a reminder of continuity, of something shared across generations. Workers once inhaled the same scent you breathe now, and perhaps even felt the same small comfort. For all the gold and ceremony of Versailles, it is this quiet warmth, hidden in the kitchens, that feels most human. You linger, eyes closed, letting the scents surround you. Warmth drifts from unseen ovens, steady and patient, while loaves rise, bake, and cool in rhythm older than memory. The air is rich with flour and fire, carrying a fragrance both humble and eternal. Here, in the hidden heart of the palace, morning does not announce itself with trumpets or ceremony. Instead, it begins quietly, faithfully, with the simple grace of bread nourishment before grandeur, life before spectacle. You continue deeper into the kitchens, and the air shifts again. The smell of bread softens into the background as a new atmosphere greets you. Here, the elements seem to meet. Fire burns steadily in the hearths, glowing with a living pulse, while water gathers quietly in stone basins drawn from hidden channels. The two opposites, fire and water, stand side by side, not in conflict, but in balance. You pause to take in this gentle harmony, knowing that centuries ago, every meal depended on this unlikely partnership. The kitchens of Versailles were not simply rooms with stoves. They were a complex network where engineering played as great a role as cooking. Fire could not exist without water, and water could not be controlled without the discipline of stone and design. The palace had one of the most elaborate water supply systems of its time, designed to feed fountains, baths, and here, the kitchens. Imagine how astonishing it must have been for visitors to see water flowing where it was most needed, even in the depths of a sprawling palace. If today's plumbers had been invited, they might have shaken their heads in admiration and asked for blueprints as souvenirs. The wells and cisterns were hidden, but essential. Buckets would be lowered and raised, ropes creaking softly, water splashing gently into stone troughs. Attendants moved with practiced care, filling jars and vessels, ensuring that the fires never lacked what they required to temper heat or to clean the endless array of copper pots. You can almost hear the trickle echo against the walls, a sound as calming as a fountain, layered beneath the crackle of flames. The entire rhythm of cooking relied upon these two constant forces, the controlled burn of fire and the steady presence of water. You pause beside one of the wells, its edge smooth from countless hands. You lean slightly and feel a faint chill rising from its depths, as if the air below has been preserved across centuries. Droplets cling to the stone, reflecting the firelight with tiny flashes. It is a reminder that beneath the luxury of banquets and the grandeur of feasts, simple elements sustained everything. Fire cooked, but water carried away soot, softened grain, simmered stews, and quenched thirst. Even the grandest of kings needed the same basic balance. There is history etched in these details. The Palace of Versailles was famous not only for its halls and mirrors, but also for its ingenious water system. To maintain fountains, baths, and kitchens simultaneously, engineers devised aqueducts and reservoirs, channels that stretched for miles. The kitchens, tucked away to reduce risks of fire spreading, still enjoyed access to this intricate network. Every drop had traveled through hidden paths before arriving here, ready to meet the flames. It was as much a triumph of planning as it was of culinary ambition. Yet mysteries linger beneath the stones. Records and excavations suggest that some underground pipes and channels remain undiscovered, buried in silence. Their exact paths are unknown, their purposes uncertain. Did they serve forgotten fountains, or did they feed secret chambers in the kitchens? Were they abandoned as technology changed, or deliberately concealed? The palace still holds these unanswered questions. Somewhere beneath your feet, water might still wait in dark tunnels, unseen, unheard, a quiet echo of a vanished world. The thought of hidden spaces adds a gentle intrigue to the calm scene. You imagine corridors running parallel to those you walk now, shadowed channels where water once coursed, carrying life unseen. Historians still debate whether hidden passages were meant for servants or for safety. Perhaps both are true. Perhaps those who built Versailles enjoyed leaving puzzles for future minds to wander through. Whatever the answer, the mystery only deepens the sense that this palace, even in stillness, hums with untold stories. You face the firelight once more. Flames leap and sway within the hearths, glowing against blackened stone, sparks flashing briefly before surrendering to ash. Their warmth fills the air, baking bread, roasting meat, simmering soups, and reflecting in polished copper. The fire moves unhurried, sometimes crackling bright, sometimes sighing low, alive as if it breathes with the palace itself. It feels like a companion, faithful across centuries, awaiting fresh wood. Kings commanded armies, yet even they could only tend fire, never truly own it. Side by side, the well and the hearth form a quiet image. Water gleams, fire glows, and in between stands the kitchen worker, balancing both. One hand might lift a bucket, the other might stir a pot over flames. It is not a glamorous image, but it is profoundly human. You feel the balance in your own breath. Inhale, exhale, warmth, and coolness. The palace may have been built for display, but survival always depended on this simple duet. You chuckle softly, thinking how even the Sun King himself would have been grumpy without a proper cup of boiled water for tea or broth. Walking further, you notice how shadows play across the walls. Fire casts moving shapes, while water reflects light in shimmering patterns. Together, they create a living mural, abstract and soothing. Each movement of flame alters the reflection. Each ripple of water bends the glow. It feels almost meditative, as though the kitchen itself is practicing a quiet art. You slow your steps, letting the dance of elements guide your thoughts into calm, measured rhythms. The air carries both sensations at once, warmth brushing one side of your skin, coolness drifting from the wells on the other. It is a rare comfort to be touched by two contrasts in harmony. You wonder how many workers centuries ago noticed this same sensation, or if they were too busy to pause. Perhaps an apprentice, tired from carrying buckets, once leaned against the well and allowed the cool stone to rest against his cheek, finding a moment of peace. History rarely records such simple gestures, but the stones might remember. You linger a moment longer between water and fire. The balance they created was not only physical but symbolic. It is a reminder that opposites need not clash, that harmony can be found when each is given its place. Fire alone consumes, water alone stagnates, but together they sustain. This lesson, quietly embodied in the kitchens of Versailles, seems as timeless as the palace itself. You walk into another quiet chamber, where the air feels cooler and heavier. The fire and water you left behind still whisper faintly in the distance, but here the atmosphere is different. Shelves and wooden tables stretch before you, each one bearing the silent weight of tools, once essential to royal feasts. You pause, noticing how still everything is, as if the room itself has been holding its breath for centuries. Knives rest in their places, their long blades dull with age, yet carrying a quiet presence. Each one once sliced through joints of meat, carved roasts, or shaped delicate cuts for banquets that dazzled kings and guests alike. You picture the clatter of steel centuries ago, when dozens of hands moved swiftly, preparing meats for feasts where abundance was as much a symbol as flavor. Now, that noise has faded, leaving only silence that seems to stretch endlessly. It is a silence so deep that you feel it in your bones, steady and calming, as if inviting you to slow down even more. Historically, knives played an essential role at Versailles. The grandeur of the court required immense feasts, and those feasts relied on blades, sharp, reliable, ready to cut through whole animals or finely portioned game. Large kitchens like these would have employed butchers, whose daily work was hidden from the elegance of the dining hall. The king and his courtiers never saw the raw beginnings of a feast, only the polished results carried out on silver platters. Yet without these knives, there would have been no banquets at all. The blades were, in their own way, as crucial as the chandeliers in the Hall of Mirrors. You lean closer to one knife that lies across the table. Its handle is smooth, worn down by use, while faint marks along the blade still glimmer under the dim light. Then you notice something unusual. Many of the knives here carry small engravings along their metal, symbols carved with care. Some look like flowers, others like geometric shapes, and a few are so abstract you cannot place them at all. Records mention that knives were often decorated, but the meanings of these symbols remain uncertain. Were they marks of ownership? Did they carry ceremonial value? Or were they simply artistic flourishes made by proud craftsmen? No one truly knows. The mystery lingers, soft and quiet, like an unanswered riddle whispered across time. You imagine a cook sharpening one of these engraved blades, running the stone slowly along its edge, sparks catching briefly in the dim kitchen. Perhaps the cook glanced at the symbol, smiled faintly at a meaning only he understood, then set the knife to work. It is a reminder that even in the most ordinary tasks, people often tuck away private meanings, small secrets left behind for curious eyes centuries later. Knives were not only tools of necessity, they represented skill, discipline, and trust. In the kitchens of Versailles, knives passed between hands constantly, yet they demanded respect. A slip could ruin not just the food, but the hand that held it. For this reason, they were handled with ritual care, sharpened, cleaned, and stored in precise places. You sense that the silence in this room is partly a memory of that care. The knives rest as though they remember discipline, waiting patiently in their final sleep. Walking further, you notice the size of the blades varies. Some are enormous, almost as long as your arm, clearly intended for breaking down whole sides of meat. Others are slender, elegant, designed for finer tasks, perhaps carving delicate slices of poultry or fish. The variety reflects the scale of feasts at Versailles, where nothing was too small or too grand. Every detail required the right tool. A modern kitchen might get by with a few knives, but here, specialization was the norm. You chuckle softly, imagining a royal cook raising an eyebrow at today, all-purpose chef's knife, and saying, "One knife for everything?" Impossible. The engravings draw your attention again. Some seem to repeat across different blades, as though a set shared a common code. Others appear unique, each one hinting at a personal story. Scholars speculate that the symbols might have marked which team or station the knives belonged to, ensuring that tools found their way back to the right hands. Still, others wonder if the symbols carried protective meanings, talismans against accidents in a dangerous workspace. You run your eyes slowly over the carvings, allowing your imagination to drift. It is soothing to consider that each simple line holds centuries of mystery, patiently resisting full explanation. You sit on a wooden bench beside the table and allow your gaze to settle on the quiet row of knives. Their stillness almost radiates calm, like a line of monks in meditation. Once, They were instruments of energy, motion, and noise. Now they are only presence, resting in their last role, to remind you of the passage of time. The change from activity to silence is comforting, as though the blades themselves have retired into peace. You smile softly, thinking that even knives deserve a long rest after centuries of work. The air feels dense, layered with the faint metallic tang of steel and the dusty sweetness of old wood. You breathe in slowly, letting the mixture settle deep within you, and calm unfurls like a quiet tide. For a moment, imagination awakens the room. The rasp of blade against stone, the steady rhythm of chopping, voices blending in soft harmony as work moves forward without pause. Then the sounds fade, dissolving into memory. You exhale, surrendering to silence once more, and your breath becomes part of the stillness, as though the room itself breathes with you. As you prepare to leave the room, you glance back once more. The knives rest exactly as they have for ages silent, waiting, their mysteries intact. Some might never reveal their meanings, but perhaps that is the beauty. In their silence, they teach patience. They remind you that not every question requires an answer. Sometimes, the quiet presence of an object is enough, offering calm simply by existing. And in that simplicity, you find your own breath slowing, your mind settling gently, as if the knives themselves are guiding you toward rest. You step slowly into a chamber where light becomes the main presence. The first thing you notice is not the tools, not the tables, but the windows themselves. They rise tall and wide, framed with stone, their glass catching whatever glow drifts in from outside. For a moment, you pause in front of one and let your eyes rest. The world feels still, the air almost suspended, as though these windows were designed to hold calm as much as light. At Versailles, the kitchens were built with grand practicality in mind. The scale of cooking required open spaces, and with so many fires constantly burning, ventilation was essential. Large windows allowed smoke to escape more freely, reducing the heavy clouds that otherwise would have filled the air. It was both a functional and aesthetic choice. You imagine cooks opening these windows at dawn, allowing fresh air to drift through, cooling the stone, balancing the sharp sense of roasting and boiling. The breeze itself must have felt like an invisible companion, reminding everyone of the world beyond the heat of stoves and flames. Some of these windows are arched elegantly, their lines echoing the grandeur of the palace above. They frame more than light, they frame perspective. Standing before them, you see courtyards, gardens, and glimpses of roofs that stretch outward in endless rows. The view would have been as much a pause for the kitchen staff as a necessity. Between long hours of chopping, stirring, and carrying, glancing through a window might have been a quiet reminder that life outside the kitchen continued. Trees swayed, and clouds moved gently across the sky. You smile softly at the thought. A 17th century cook leaning on a windowsill, secretly hoping for just a little breeze to cool his face. But not all windows here were open to view. Some, curiously, were always veiled. Records mention a few window frames that remained covered by thick curtains, drawn tightly no matter the time of day. The reason was never written down, leaving only speculation. Was it to conceal something from prying eyes? Perhaps to shield certain foods or spices from direct sunlight? Or maybe it was an unspoken tradition, kept alive without explanation. The absence of clarity leaves a gentle mystery, one that lingers like a shadow in bright air. You imagine a curtain stirring slightly, though no hand has touched it for centuries. The interplay of light and fabric fascinates you. Even with curtains drawn, filtered light sneaks through, softening the atmosphere, casting long lines across stone floors and wooden tables. The effect is calming, almost meditative. It reminds you that not all illumination must be direct. Sometimes gentleness reveals more than brilliance. A covered window is like a whisper, quieter, subtler, inviting you to look more closely. Perhaps that was its purpose all along, not secrecy, but stillness. You walk slowly along the row of windows. Each one frames a different view, and each one filters light in its own way. Some let in bold shafts of brightness, marking the walls with clean angles. Others spread a soft, diffused glow, almost like water seeping across a surface. You notice how the light changes the colors of everything it touches. Copper pots glimmer warmer, knives gleam colder, bread crusts appear golden. The kitchens themselves become a canvas, painted anew with each shift of the sun. Standing here, you realize that windows were not just practical but artistic. They allowed the space to breathe, to live with them. Morning light carried energy, signaling the start of work. Afternoon light settled deeper, slower, as tasks moved toward completion. And evening light stretched long shadows, hinting at rest. Even without a clock, the cooks might have felt time through windows, measuring their day by the changing character of brightness. You chuckle quietly, thinking how today we rely on phone alarms. Yet a cook centuries ago could simply glance at sunlight and know how much bread still needed to rise. A breeze slips through the windows, carrying stories of scent. You picture it mingling aromas, herbs crushed on tables, meat roasting, broth simmering, smoke drifting upward. These fragrances must have traveled beyond the palace walls, teasing passers-by. Perhaps a gardener, bent over tulips, caught roasted lamb in the air. Perhaps a child smelled baked apples and searched for their source. Through these windows, the kitchens reached outward, sharing whispers of feasts that most would never taste. You lean against the stone sill and listen. There is no noise now, only the faint hum of your own breath. But once, these openings echoed with the chatter of voices, the scrape of chairs, the distant call from one courtyard to another. Windows served as quiet messengers, carrying sounds as well as light. A cook might have shouted instructions through one, or called for water to be brought quickly. Even without stepping outside, the windows kept the kitchens linked to the life of the palace. And yet, your mind returns to the mystery of the veiled frames. Why always covered? Some historians have suggested it could have been a matter of security windows, leading to passages no one was supposed to see. Others whisper of symbolism, that perhaps those covered windows marked thresholds between sacred and ordinary tasks. But with no surviving record, certainty is impossible. The curtains remain silent, keeping their secrets intact. Their fabric may have frayed, but the mystery has not. You take a final glance at the windows around you. The light has shifted again, glowing a little softer, a little warmer. Shadows stretch slowly along the floor, and the air seems to calm even further. The rooms breathe through these frames, balancing fire with breeze, labor with pause. You exhale, noticing that your own rhythm has matched the windows. Slower, gentler, as though you too are part of the steady flow of air and light. As you turn to leave, you smile faintly at the thought that centuries ago, a cook may have paused here, just as you have, leaning on the sill, enjoying a sliver of calm between endless tasks. The windows framed not just the kitchens, but also the fleeting human moments within them, moments of rest, thought, and quiet wonder. And even now, those moments linger, carried gently in the stillness, waiting for anyone who stops long enough to notice. You step softly into another chamber, and the first thing you notice is not the stone, nor the air, but the shelves. They line the walls, stretching upward in careful order, carrying jars and containers that seem almost timeless. Each one rests in silence, their glass or clay surfaces faintly catching the dim glow of lantern light. The room feels warmer here, not from fire, but from memory, as if the very walls have absorbed the aromas of centuries. You pause, inhaling gently, and the air whispers of distant places. In Versailles, spices were treasures. They came from across the seas, carried by ships through uncertain waters, traded in markets filled with noise and barter, and finally delivered into royal kitchens, where they transformed simple food into royal banquets. Cinnamon, nutmeg, pepper, cloves each carried the essence of another land, another climate, another story. To taste a dish here was to taste echoes of India, the Caribbean, the Far East. Every grain of spice was both flavor and symbol, a sign of wealth, of reach of power that stretched across continents. The shells themselves were more than storage. They were maps of the world. Imagine an attendant opening a jar and releasing a puff of scent that carried an entire geography in its particles. A pinch of saffron spoke of Mediterranean fields glowing under sun. A crack of black pepper hinted at humid forests where vines curled endlessly. Vanilla carried the sweetness of islands where orchids bloomed. The kitchen, through these spices, became a vessel of travel, allowing Versailles to inhale the breath of the globe without ever leaving France. And yet, among these jars lies mystery. Records mention containers with simple labels, just one word: epices. No origin, no explanation, only the vaguest name. What were they? Rare imports that never became common enough to be identified? Secret blends created by cooks whose recipes were whispered but never written? Or perhaps ingredients now lost to time, forgotten plants, or dried roots that no longer exist in the same form? The shells carry silence as much as aroma, their labels hiding secrets behind simplicity. You run your eyes along the imaginary row. Some jars gleam with polished glass. Others are heavy clay, their lids sealed tightly with wax. Dust gathers faintly along the tops, marking years past. In your mind, you lift one down, brush away the film of time, and feel the weight of history resting in your hands. Opening it would release not just fragrance but memory, the exact same smell that once filled the palace halls, rising softly toward chandeliers and gilded ceilings. It's strange to think how something so small could carry such grandeur. A pinch of spice could alter an entire dish, changing it from plain to extraordinary. Imagine the anticipation in the royal court, a soup lifted by a dash of nutmeg, a dessert transformed by vanilla, a meat stew deepened with pepper. Each taste was an event, each aroma part of ceremony. These jars were not just kitchen tools, they were keys to delight, to surprise, to wonder. You smile quietly at the thought of the cooks themselves. Surrounded by shelves, they must have felt both empowered and cautious. Too much of one spice could overwhelm, too little, and the dish might fall flat. The act of seasoning became almost like painting, strokes of flavor layered carefully, one after another. Perhaps this is why the shelves seem so dignified even now. They were instruments of art, resting patiently until called upon. The room carries an energy that is both vibrant and contemplative. You can almost hear the clink of spoons against jars, the faint scraping of lids as they were lifted. The scents would have mingled in the air suite, sharp, earthy, bitter, creating a tapestry of smell that wrapped itself around the kitchens. Even today, if you close your eyes, you might sense it lingering, faint traces woven into the stones themselves. The mystery of the unnamed jars continues to intrigue historians. Some speculate that epices referred not to a specific spice, but to a mixture, a custom blend reserved for certain royal tastes. Others wonder if secrecy itself was part of the design, keeping recipes hidden from rivals, ensuring that only Versailles could claim certain flavors. And then there's the possibility of error, that over time, labels were lost, rewritten, or simplified. Whatever the truth, the mystery deepens the allure, making each jar feel like a silent riddle. You imagine yourself standing before one such jar, holding it close, your breath slow, almost afraid to open it. Perhaps it contains something ordinary, or perhaps something extraordinary. But the true treasure lies not in the answer, but in the anticipation, the sense of possibility sealed inside. The shelves stand quietly, a harmony of order and mystery. Light drifts across them, creating gentle shadows between jars, soft highlights along lids. The rhythm of arrangement feels intentional, as though each jar has its proper place, a choreography of stillness. Looking at them invites reflection on patience, on the care required to preserve something delicate across centuries. As you linger here, you realize the shelves are not just storage. They are guardians. They guard stories of distant lands, of trade and risk, of cooks experimenting, of kings tasting something for the very first time. They guard the unknown, too, those jars labeled only with vagueness, reminding you that history is never complete, always holding back some secrets. You step back, allowing the room to widen before you. Shelves, spices, shafts of light, and silence weave together into something like meditation. Each jar feels like a breath drawn from another world. Each faded label, a word paused halfway to speech. Centuries may have slipped away, yet the air here still holds the echo of their presence, whispers of flavors, of hands that measured and poured, of lives folded quietly into the rhythm of this place. As you prepare to leave, you glance one last time. The shelves remain as they have for ages, still, composed, waiting. You smile softly, sensing that the spices, like the palace itself, are more than objects. They are memory, condensed into fragrance, into taste, into silence. And whether named or unnamed, they continue to whisper secrets of journeys, secrets of flavors, secrets of time itself. You step slowly into another chamber, and here the air feels different. It carries a quiet weight, not of spices or bread, but of metal. Against the walls, polished copper pots and pans rest in careful rows, each one gleaming faintly, even in the dim light. Their rounded shapes catch whatever glow the lanterns provide, scattering it softly, as though the very surfaces were designed to play with shadows. You pause, taking in the sight, and you realize that this is less a kitchen corner and more a gallery. In Versailles, copper was more than practical. It was a statement. The palace became famous for its dazzling collection of pots and pans, large and small, deep and shallow, each crafted with precision. Copper conducted heat beautifully, allowing cooks to control temperatures in a way that other metals could not. A sauce could be stirred gently without scorching. A delicate custard could set without curdling, and a piece of meat could sear evenly across its surface. These pots were tools, but also symbols of mastery. To cook with copper was to cook with excellence. You look more closely and notice the variations. Some pots are broad and low, meant for reducing sauces until they shimmer with richness. Others are tall and slender, perfect for soups that needed to simmer slowly, absorbing every note of flavor. The largest could have fed dozens, while the smallest seemed almost comically dainty, as if meant for a single spoonful of something precious. The diversity speaks of the grand scale of Versailles dining, where no dish was too simple to deserve perfection. And yet, not every pot here tells the same story. Among them are a few that appear untouched. Records whisper that certain pieces of copper were never used for cooking at all. They were polished to brilliance, set out where they would catch the eye, more decoration than tool. Why? Perhaps they were meant to impress visiting dignitaries, a silent display of wealth and refinement. Or perhaps they marked ceremonial roles, reserved for dishes so rare they were almost never prepared. The unused pots stand as quiet riddles, their surfaces immaculate, their purpose left behind in mystery. You run your gaze along the shelves and notice how the light interacts. Copper holds a kind of warmth, even when cool to the touch. It does not shine harshly like silver, nor fade into dullness like iron. Instead, it glows softly, reflecting its surroundings in blurred, golden tones. The lantern beside you casts ripples of light across the curved sides, and for a moment you feel as if you are standing in a room full of captured sunsets. Each pot seems to hold a piece of the sky, stored away for later. There's humor in the thought, too. Imagine the cooks, busy and sweating, surrounded by dozens of gleaming pots that needed constant polishing. Copper tarnishes quickly, and keeping it spotless was a task in itself. Perhaps an unlucky apprentice was given the duty, scrubbing each piece until it gleamed, only to begin again the next day. You can almost hear a sigh in the air, the eternal rhythm of polish, cook, polish again. If patience had a metallic form, surely it would look like these rows of copper. The room seems to magnify the quiet presence of copper. Stone walls keep the air cool, while the pots glow faintly with stored warmth. Together they form a balance of contrasts, hard rock and shining metal, silence and reflection. As you move through the space, your footsteps fall softly, almost swallowed by the curves around you. The copper surfaces bend the light into muted shapes, like gentle mirrors, distorting edges until the room feels both grounded and dreamlike. At Versailles, copper held value beyond its usefulness in the kitchen. It was a statement of refinement and control. To line the shelves with rows of gleaming pots was to proclaim not only wealth, but mastery over the smallest details of royal life. The king's table allowed no room for error, and copper, with its even heat, offered the precision required. A curdled sauce was not a mere mishap. It risked reflecting poorly on the cook, and by extension, the court itself. These vessels were therefore more than tools. They became silent actors in the theater of monarchy, bearing the weight of ceremony as surely as the dishes they produced. But again, your eyes return to those unused pieces. They gleam just a little too perfectly, their surfaces without even the faintest scratch. They sit like ornaments, and you wonder if they were placed here deliberately, part of a quiet theater. Perhaps the very act of seeing them was meant to inspire awe, reminding all who entered that Versailles spared nothing, not even in kitchens. Or maybe their mystery is simpler, a case of gifts never used, items admired but impractical. The truth lingers in shadow, unrecorded, and that makes the silence deeper. The longer you linger, the more the pots seem alive. Shadows bend around them, light glides across their curves, and reflections shift with every breath. They are still, yet never entirely still, always echoing the world around them. You imagine how they once filled with bubbling sauces, how steam rose in gentle spirals, how ladles dipped and stirred. Even empty, they carry the memory of fullness, like vessels of time. You smile at the thought. If each pot could speak, it likely would not recall grand feasts or noble banquets. Instead, it might grumble about endless scrubbing, the wear of constant stacking and unstacking, the strain of being thrust from blazing heat into sudden cool. The humor lies in that ordinariness, in the quiet labor behind brilliance. Even in a palace of glittering spectacle, the shine of copper was earned by effort, by the steady human touch that never truly faded. As you prepare to leave, you take one last look. Copper pots line the shelves like patient guardians, their surfaces glowing softly in the half-light. Some tell stories of meals and mastery, others remain silent mysteries, unused yet perfect. Together, they form a chorus of quiet reflection. You step back into the corridor, carrying with you the sense of warmth and calm, as though the copper itself has lent you a bit of its glow. You walk further into the kitchens, and here the sense of movement is different. It is not the sudden clash of pans or the sharp clatter of knives. Instead, it feels like rhythm. The space carries echoes of countless hands, all working together, in steady patterns, like a quiet orchestra without sound. Every gesture once had its place, every step its timing, until the entire kitchen became a dance of preparation. At Versailles, hundreds of cooks, bakers, and assistants worked daily to keep the royal household fed. The sheer scale of the task is almost unimaginable. Breakfast, lunch, supper, late-night feasts, and endless banquets required not only skill but coordination. Teams were divided into specialties, some dedicated to sauces, others to roasts, others to pastries. Each group moved in harmony, their roles overlapping like threads in a woven fabric. The result was not just food, but order, presented with precision at the king's table. You imagine the room at dawn, long before guests stirred. Fires were stoked, water hauled, ingredients laid out in quiet lines. There must have been noise. Yes, but beneath it all was a pulse, a steady rhythm of work. Hands chopping, hands stirring, feet stepping carefully across stone floors. Each person knew their role, their place in the sequence. It was less chaos than choreography. The kitchen was alive, but alive in a measured way, like breathing. Records tell us that everything was done with remarkable timing. If one task faltered, the chain could break, and the meal might fail to impress. That pressure shaped the rhythm itself, making it both calm and relentless. The repetition soothed, but it also demanded focus. There was little room for error, though perhaps a misplaced spoon here, or there might have drawn a small laugh. You might smile, thinking of a weary assistant stirring the wrong pot, only to be gently corrected and teased, the rhythm briefly interrupted before resuming again. Among the writings that survive, there is mention of something curious, a silent hour of preparation. No one knows exactly what this meant. Perhaps it was a rule to quiet the bustle, to let cooks focus inward without chatter. Or maybe it was a ritual, a moment when words gave way to gestures, allowing rhythm itself to dominate. Whatever the reason, the idea lingers like a soft puzzle. In a kitchen so full of sound, silence must have felt profound, like pausing between heartbeats. The thought brings a calm to your steps. You picture rows of attendants working without speaking, only the scrape of knives and the whisper of spoons, breaking the quiet. No laughter, no calls, no instructions, just the sound of preparation itself. It must have felt almost meditative, a reminder that even in the busiest of places, stillness can be found. Perhaps this was the real secret, not silence for its own sake, but silence as a way to restore balance, to let the rhythm become more than routine. You linger near a long wooden table, scarred from centuries of use. Its surface holds memories of countless meals, of dough rolled thin and herbs chopped fine. The grain of the wood seems to ripple gently, almost in time with your breath. You sense the patience of those who worked here, their days filled with repetition. The rhythm of cutting and mixing, of folding and stirring, must have brought comfort, even in labor. Like a lullaby made of gestures. There is humor in that thought too. Imagine a young apprentice, eager and clumsy, trying to keep up with the rhythm, perhaps slicing too quickly, perhaps spilling flour in a rush. Older cooks might have shaken their heads, offering advice with the patience of those who knew the rhythm could not be forced. You smile, realizing that some lessons take time, and kitchens, like life, teach patience through repetition. The stone walls seem to hold a faint echo, carrying traces of that old rhythm. It is not haunting but tender, a reminder that presence lingers in every sound once made here. The scrape of knives, the stir of spoons, the shuffle of feet, all wove together into a single pulse. Even now, your own breath seems to align with. It's slow and steady, as though the kitchen itself still guides each motion in quiet harmony. This rhythm was more than work. It was continuity. Each day began with the same tasks, repeated endlessly, yet each day also held slight variations, new ingredients, new guests, new demands. The rhythm allowed the kitchen to adapt, like a current flowing around stones. It was stable, but never rigid. That balance is what made Versailles not only a palace of grandeur, but also of quiet resilience. You picture the banquets that once unfolded glittering with music, laughter, and endless display. Yet behind each lavish course lay the rhythm you sense here, the silent hours of labor, the steady focus of hands, the quiet breath of countless cooks working in unison. The feast may have been the stage, dazzling in its brilliance, but preparation was its heartbeat. Without that unseen harmony, Versailles could never have radiated its splendor so completely. As you pause, You let your gaze soften, and the room seems to blur. Copper pots glint faintly, knives rest quietly, and the wooden table seems to hum with history. You breathe slowly, in rhythm with the kitchen's imagined pulse. It is not about speed, not about urgency. It is about presence, about being part of something larger and calmer than yourself. The rhythm is still here, waiting for you to notice it. And so, you linger, your steps unhurried, your breath steady, your mind quiet. The gentle rhythm of preparation surrounds you like a soft blanket, reminding you that even in a palace built for grandeur, peace can be found in the smallest motions. The silence, the order, the steady flow of work together, they create calm, not through absence, but through pattern. You leave this space with that rhythm within you, carrying it like a slow heartbeat into the corridors beyond. You leave the kitchens behind, your steps slowing as you enter the marble corridors. The air feels cooler here, touched by the stone that lines the walls and floors. Every sound becomes gentler, yet somehow more lasting. A single step lingers, as a faint echo, rolling down the passage before fading into silence. It feels as though the corridors themselves want you to notice each movement, to walk deliberately, to let the rhythm of sound and stillness carry you forward. The Palace of Versailles is famous for its marble. It was used to show wealth and grandeur, but it also served a practical purpose. These corridors connected the kitchens to the great halls, where banquets dazzled guests under crystal chandeliers. Servants hurried through them daily, carrying trays, pitchers, and dishes, yet the corridors preserved their cool, echoing calm. The stone absorbed the bustle, holding it in memory, so that today you hear not chaos, but whispers of a world long gone dot as you walk. You imagine the shuffle of countless feet, shoes against marble, wheels of carts rolling lightly, quiet exchanges. Between attendants, all would have filled the air, and yet the stone outlasted the noise. The echoes remain, even when voices are forgotten. Each corridor feels like a timekeeper, its walls holding the resonance of centuries. A library, not of books, but of sound. You might smile, thinking that if these halls could play back their recordings, you would hear centuries of footsteps, all blending together into one steady hum. Like the world's longest lullaby, some records say that one corridor in particular became the subject of quiet stories. At night, attendants spoke of footsteps that could be heard when no one was walking. Sometimes soft, sometimes firm, they seemed to move at their own pace, echoing faintly long after the palace had fallen. Silent. No one ever proved where the sounds came from, but the legend persisted, passed quietly from servant to servant. The thought was not frightening, but oddly reassuring, as if the palace itself refused to let silence be absolute. You pause in that thought, listening. Of course, the corridor around you is empty, yet even the smallest sound, the shift of your breath, the faint brush of fabric, seems to stretch and multiply. The marble plays with every vibration, sending it outward, folding it back, then releasing it slowly. You notice how different it feels compared to the kitchens. There, rhythm came from people. Here, rhythm comes from stone. Both are steady, both are calming, but in different ways. There is history carved into these very walls. The marble was chosen not only for its beauty, but for its permanence. It connected the practical heart of the palace, the kitchens, with the ceremonial heart, the banquet halls. Through these corridors passed meals that dazzled ambassadors, nobles, and kings. Each dish, each glass of wine, made its journey along this path, carried carefully so that not a drop spilled, not a plate wavered. The echoes you hear today are the remnants of that long procession. And yet the mystery remains. What of the footsteps? At night, some suggested it was simply the settling of the stone, the expansion and contraction of marble as the air cooled. Others believed it was memory itself, the corridor replaying its past over and over, unable to remain still. A few even whispered that the palace had become so accustomed to life that it could not stop imitating it, even in darkness. You might quietly chuckle, picturing marble slabs holding conversations with each other in the middle of the night, gossiping about which feast was the most extravagant. The light here is gentle. High windows allow pale rays to touch the floor, creating shifting patterns. As clouds move outside, the brightness changes slowly, so that even the still corridor feels alive. The marble reflects faint glimmers, softened by time. You notice how the stone, polished by centuries of hands and feet, seems to glow rather than shine. As if storing the memory of every candle that once burned here. There is calm in this echoing space. Each step you take reminds you of the patience of stone. It has waited for centuries, receiving countless impressions, and yet it still stands, serene and watchful. The corridor does not hurry you. Instead, it invites you to slow your pace, to hear not just your steps, but the long pause that follows them. In that pause, stillness becomes almost tangible. You can rest inside it, as if silence were a chair offered to you by the palace itself. Servants must have felt this too, moving quickly, yet always aware of the sound they carried with them. Perhaps they found humor in it, whispering jokes about how even the walls seemed to listen. You might smile, thinking of a tray-bearer who tried to tiptoe, only to discover that marble does not let secrets stay hidden. Every attempt at stealth became a soft announcement, proof that even silence has texture. As you reach a turning point, you pause again. The corridor stretches in two directions, both equally quiet, both equally timeless. The choice feels unimportant, because no matter where you walk, the marble will echo your presence with the same gentle persistence. That is the gift of this place, to remind you that every movement matters, but none needs to be rushed. The palace built these corridors for function, yet in their echoes they gave something more, a rhythm that soothes. Here, grandeur and practicality meet in sound, weaving history into each soft footfall. You linger in that sound, letting it carry you, steady and calm, like a breath stretched across centuries. So you walk on, not seeking an end, but simply embracing the act of moving forward. The marble floor receives each step, returning it in gentle echoes, until you feel less a guest and more a note within the palace's rhythm. Stone and silence weave together, carrying a steady breath through the halls. And in that shared cadence, the boundary fades. You no longer walk alone. The palace breathes, and in this quiet night, you breathe with it. You leave the marble corridor and step into a smaller chamber, its air gentler, its purpose quieter. The space feels like an interlude, designed not for fire or feasts, but for stillness. Here, the tools are more delicate. Instead of knives or heavy pots, you see cups, teapots, and jars, each one waiting with silent patience. The transition feels natural, as though the palace itself has guided you from echo to calm, from stone to porcelain, from sound to sip. Though not native to France, became a treasured part of courtly life in the 17th century. Brought from distant lands, its aroma carried with it both novelty and refinement. At Versailles, tea was more than a drink. It was a statement, a mark of elegance, a gentle counterpoint to the grand meals prepared in the bustling kitchens. When the court gathered, cups of steaming liquid were served alongside conversation, their warmth softening the chill of vast halls. You notice how the ritual still lingers here, even in silence, as if the walls remember the steam rising softly. Toward painted ceilings, a curious fact remains tucked in historical records. There was, it seems, a cabinet reserved for one of the queens, containing a particularly rare tea. The leaves were stored carefully, their supply guarded, their use restricted to special occasions. The name of the tea is lost, or perhaps it was never written down. The secrecy adds an air of intimacy, as though the drink itself was not meant for public display, but for private comfort. You might smile, imagining the queen asking for her tea, and an attendant unlocking a cupboard with the same reverences. One might open a treasure chest. Some historians wonder if this tea was more medicinal than ceremonial. Perhaps it carried herbs known for calming the nerves or aiding sleep. Or perhaps it was symbolic, an infusion meant to remind the queen of distant lands, fragrant gardens, or secret remedies. Whatever the case, the thought lingers. Tea at Versailles was not only about flavor, but about meaning, both hidden and shared. You picture the process. Water drawn carefully, heated slowly, poured with precision. Leaves steeping gently, their essence unfolding in silence. The sound of liquid against. Porcelain, a faint curl of steam, the pause before the first sip each step, holds its own quiet rhythm. It feels less like preparing a drink and more like conducting a meditation. Even the smallest motions, lifting a spoon, resting a cup, seem designed to slow time. You might chuckle softly, imagining a modern electric kettle buzzing impatiently. In this serene room, completely out of tune with the palace's rhythm, the chamber itself supports the ritual. Windows allow a soft, natural light to filter in, reflecting against the smooth surfaces of porcelain. The tables are arranged neatly, leaving space for cups and jars to rest without clutter. Shelves hold containers labeled carefully, though. Some bear only simple words like epices or "the," as if mystery were part of the flavor. The scent here is lighter than in the kitchens, not roasted or spiced, but faintly floral, faintly herbal, like the ghost of a garden carried indoors. You pause to imagine attendants moving through this space centuries ago. They spoke in hushed tones, not wishing to disturb the calm. Their hands moved carefully, aware that the smallest spill would disrupt the sense of order. When they carried trays of cups to the court, they balanced them with steady precision, each step measured like part of a slow dance. The palace demanded grandeur, but here it demanded serenity. The contrast makes you smile, as though even the most powerful kings and queens needed a quiet pause for tea. The ritual had social meaning as well. Sharing tea was a moment of conversation, of measured intimacy, a time when attention shifted from spectacle to presence. The banquet table dazzled with roasted meats and golden platters, but the tea table offered something smaller, something gentler. In its warmth, people found space to talk softly, to rest their voices, to feel the comfort of holding something delicate in their hands. It was the palace's way of reminding everyone that grandeur could coexist with stillness. And still, the mystery of the Queen's private tea remains. Some believe it was brought from the Far East, rare and precious. Others imagine it might have been mixed secretly by palace apothecaries, blending herbs and spices known only to a few. Without records, the truth drifts like steam, visible for a moment and then gone. You might smile at the thought that the palace itself keeps this secret, a fragrance that lingers, but never reveals its name. In this imagined pause, you allow yourself to linger. You can almost feel the warmth of a porcelain cup in your hands, its surface smooth and slightly heated. The first sip is gentle, not sharp, not hurried, just a steady unfolding of taste. The flavor does not rush to reveal itself. It waits, it deepens, it invites you to slow your breath and notice. In that pause, you realize that tea is not just a drink, it is a teacher of patience. The palace walls seem to echo the same lesson. Just as marble preserved the memory of countless footsteps, these shelves and cups hold within them a memory of calm. Preparing tea in this space feels less like an action of the present and more like joining a rhythm that has lingered for centuries, a rhythm shaped by patience and quiet care. It reminds you that even within Versailles, where ceremony demanded spectacle and grandeur, there was always room for stillness, a small refuge carved out for gentleness. And so, as you stand in this chamber, you let the calm surround you. The imagined warmth of tea steadies your breathing, softens your thoughts, and quiets your senses. You feel that the palace has shifted once more from fire to stone, from echo to sip, and each shift carries you deeper into stillness. You linger in that stillness, smiling quietly at the idea that sometimes the most important rituals are also the simplest. You step into another section of the kitchens, and your eyes are drawn upward almost at once. The ceilings here rise higher than you expect, arching above you like a stone canopy. Their purpose was practical, to release the smoke and heat from endless cooking fires, but the effect is unexpectedly graceful. You find yourself tilting your head, noticing how light filters down from openings high above, drifting slowly through the air as though it has taken its time to arrive. The shafts of sunlight carry with them a sense of rhythm. They move across the walls as the day passes, casting patterns that change hour by hour. In the morning, the beams are pale and angled, brushing against copper pots until they glow like softly polished mirrors. By afternoon, the light deepens, settling into golden warmth that makes the stone appear almost alive. At dusk, the rays thin and fade, leaving behind a memory of color like an aftertaste. You can almost hear the light itself sigh as it leaves. Historically, these high ceilings were part of the careful design of Versailles. They were necessary to allow the smoke of countless fires to escape, to prevent the kitchens from becoming unbearable. Ventilation shafts and hidden flues guided the air upward, and the height itself created space for heat to rise above the working cooks. Without this design, the labor of preparing royal banquets might have been impossible. The architecture was both functional and, in its own way, quietly elegant. You may laugh softly at the thought that the first interior designer here was not thinking of beauty, but of how not to roast the staff like the meals they prepared. And yet, beyond practicality, there is something mysterious. If you look carefully, you notice faint designs etched or painted into the stone, markings that time has dimmed. Some resemble floral motifs, curling vines that stretch as though they were meant to climb into the light. Others seem geometric, almost symbolic, though their meaning is unclear. No records mention them, no documents explain them. The decorations linger like whispers that no one has answered. You pause, trying to imagine who might have made them. Were they commissioned, part of a forgotten plan to elevate even the kitchen ceilings into works of art? Or were they the quiet work of someone less noticed, a craftsman leaving a mark, a painter testing a brush, an apprentice carving patterns during idle moments? The fact that no explanation survives makes them strangely personal, as though they were not meant for history at all, but only for those who happen to look upward while waiting for the bread to rise. Light plays across these faint images, revealing them only in certain hours. At noon, when the sun is strongest, the designs almost vanish, swallowed by brightness. But in the gentler hours of morning or late afternoon, shadows draw them out, making them visible again like secret paintings that refuse to be seen on demand. You imagine a cook pausing, flour still on his hands, glancing upward and catching sight of vines that seem to breathe in the sunlight. Perhaps it offered comfort during long days, a reminder that beauty could appear even in places of labor. The atmosphere here feels different from other parts of the kitchens. The height creates a sense of openness, of space not easily filled by noise. Sounds rise and soften, as though the ceilings themselves are swallowing them gently. Even the clatter of pots feels less sharp, muted by distance. You might joke that these ceilings were the palace's first attempt at noise-canceling design, centuries before headphones were invented. The effect is calming, as though the architecture itself wished to ease the burden of constant work. As you linger, you begin to notice how the light changes your own perception. The beams of sunlight do not rush. They filter in slowly, taking their time, touching surfaces with patience. Watching them is like watching water drip, steady and unhurried. You find yourself breathing in rhythm with the light, letting it guide you into stillness. The palace may have demanded speed from its servants, but the sun followed its own pace, reminding everyone that not all things could be hurried. There is also a sense of ritual in the way the day unfolded here. Morning light meant preparation. Noon light meant activity at its height. Evening light meant winding down, cleaning tools, storing food. The ceiling became a clock, marking time not with ticking hands, but with shifting beams. Those who worked here may not have thought about it, but the pattern shaped their days nonetheless. The ceiling was both shelter and guide, silent but dependable. And yet, the mystery of the faded artwork remains. Some believe they were intentional, perhaps a symbolic reminder that even spaces of labor should reflect the grandeur of Versailles. Others think they might have been test sketches, abandoned when more important tasks arose. Still others suggest they were never meant to be seen at all, only to exist as private expressions of creativity. Without records, the question remains. Open, like the shafts of light that continue to fall and fade, you feel a quiet appreciation for this uncertainty. Not every detail of history can be explained. Sometimes it is enough to know that beauty exists, even if its origin is unclear. The faint drawings on the ceiling are like dreams remembered only in fragments, their meaning elusive, but their presence undeniable. They remind you that mystery is not a flaw, but a gift, an invitation to wonder. Standing there, you let your gaze follow the light once more. It seems softer now, warmer, as though it has learned something in its descent. It touches your hands, your face, your breath, and you feel that the palace is offering you not grandeur but calm. You imagine cooks pausing, apprentices smiling, even kings and queens unaware of the quiet beauty above their feasts. And in that image, the ceiling is no longer just stone. It is a canvas for time itself, painted anew each day by the brush strokes of the sun. You turn a corner and find yourself in a quieter chamber, away from the clatter of pots and the smell of roasting fires. Here, the air feels cooler, almost like a library. Shelves line the walls, though not with spices or copper vessels, but with books, ledgers, and scrolls. The kitchens of Versailles were not only about cooking. They were also about documenting, recording, and preserving the details of every royal feast. You notice the rows of bound volumes, each one labeled with dates and occasions. They hold the records of endless menus, carefully written by attendants, whose job was not to chop or stir, but to remember. A grand banquet could involve dozens of dishes, each one noted down so that nothing was forgotten. Even the smallest luncheon might leave behind a page of description. In this way, the meals of Versailles became part of history, as though the food itself had left footprints in ink. The handwriting varies from one book to another. Some lines are neat and formal, each letter standing upright like soldiers in formation. Others are looser, more hurried, suggesting a scribe rushing to capture the list before the details slipped away. You can almost imagine the scene. A clerk standing in a bustling kitchen, scribbling furiously while cooks shouted out dishes, flour drifting through the air like snow. You smile at the thought. Perhaps the real flavor of these meals is hidden, not in the food, but in the smudged ink. Historically, Versailles prided itself on detail. Every feast was planned with precision, and every dish, from the grand roasts to the smallest tarts, had to be accounted for. Records allowed the court to repeat successful menus, avoid errors, and showcase the abundance of the French crown. Some menus stretched across pages, listing soups, fish, poultry, game, pastries, and sweets in such numbers that you wonder how anyone could have eaten so much. The banquets were less about hunger and more about spectacle, a theater of food that required careful choreography. And yet, among these detailed records, there is a curious mystery. Some menus list dishes by name, but give no description of their preparation. A page might note royal pheasant pie or herbal sauce of the king, but not a word about how the dish was made. It is as though the scribes wanted to record the existence of the meal, but not reveal its secrets. You pause on this thought. Were these omissions intentional? Were some recipes considered too precious to write down, passed only by word of mouth from master to apprentice? The missing details give the menus a secretive quality. They read like puzzles, long lists with a few blank spaces, gaps that invite the imagination. Perhaps this was a way of guarding prestige. If another court tried to copy Versailles, they might have the names, but not the essence. The dishes themselves would remain unique, tied to the palace and its hidden knowledge. You could laugh gently at the idea of recipe hoarding, centuries before cookbooks became common, like a chef today, hiding the password to the family W.I-Fi. Looking closer, you notice how the menus also reflect the rhythm of the seasons. Spring pages are filled with tender greens and fresh herbs. Summer brings berries, peaches, and chilled creams. Autumn introduces rich game and heavy sauces. Winter leans into preserved meats, root vegetables, and hearty stews. The records are not just lists of food, but reminders of time passing, of nature, feeding the palace in cycles that continue even now. You feel the steady flow of seasons in every word. In some ledgers, the ink has faded to pale brown, the paper fragile at the edges. Still, the words remain legible, defying centuries of handling. These were working documents, used and reused, yet cared for enough to survive. The survival itself feels deliberate, as though the palace understood that the memory of food was as important as the food itself. After all, the meals vanished in a night, but the menus endured. They became the palace's way of tasting eternity. You notice small marginal notes scattered along the pages. A cook once scribbled "serve two," cold, while another hand added "excellent for summer." Elsewhere, a quick reminder reads, "repeat for the Queen's liking." These brief remarks soften the formality of the grand menus, pulling them down from ceremony into the realm of daily life. They remind you that behind the splendor were people, cooks with opinions, preferences, and even small annoyances. In their handwriting, the menus feel transformed, not as distant monuments, but as quiet conversations reaching gently across centuries. Some historians still puzzle over these gaps and details. Why were certain dishes named, but not explained? Why did some menus disappear altogether, leaving only hints of what was once served? Were they intentionally destroyed to protect secrets, or did they simply fade with time? The lack of answers only adds to the intrigue. It reminds you that history is not always about certainty. Sometimes it is about the quiet pleasure of wondering. You lean back and let the thought settle. The menus, endless as they seem, are like a dream diary of Versailles. They record abundance, order, and ritual, but also conceal mysteries, as if the palace wished to keep a little something for itself. You feel calm, knowing that even in a place devoted to grandeur, there were still small silences, moments unrecorded, flavors lost to memory. The light in this chamber is soft, the air hushed, and the books seem to breathe with stories they will never fully reveal. As you turn to leave, you imagine carrying one of these volumes under your arm, heavy with ink and time. Its pages would flutter open at random, offering glimpses of forgotten dishes, leaving you hungry not for food, but for understanding. And perhaps that is the real gift of these records, not the meals they describe, but the gentle reminder that life, like history, is full of details both remembered and lost. You wander deeper into the palace grounds, and soon the rhythm of the day begins to fade. The laughter of banquets and the chatter of attendants grow quiet, replaced by a softer hum that belongs only to night. Midnight in the kitchens feels like entering another world, one where the walls themselves breathe with silence. The stone floors no longer echo with constant footsteps, yet a faint energy lingers, as though the room is aware of its long history of motion. The kitchens of Versailles did not sleep when the palace slept. During grand celebrations and festivals, the work continued long after the last guest had risen from the table. Fires had to be tended, sauces stirred, breads baked, and meats prepared for the morning's feasts. Some nights, hundreds of hands remained busy, carrying out tasks with careful discipline. The palace demanded perfection, and perfection did not rest when the clock struck 12. Yet despite this ceaseless labor, there was a calmness to the midnight hours. The voices of day gave way to whispers, or sometimes no voices at all. A pot might hiss gently, or a knife might scrape softly on wood, but these sounds seemed smaller, swallowed by the vast stone chambers. You feel that this stillness carried its own rhythm, as though night itself had asked the kitchens to work in slower time. If morning was the drumbeat of preparation, midnight was the soft hum of a lullaby. You imagined the flicker of torches and the glow of banked fires, casting long shadows across copper pots. Attendants moved carefully, their faces lit with orange light, their movements slower than in the rush of day. The night seemed to demand deliberation, as if every gesture had to stretch longer, smoother, and quieter. It was less about speed and more about persistence. Someone once joked that at Versailles, even the shadows had a work schedule. And then, among the routine, a mystery enters. Old records mention strange lights in the kitchens at night lights that appeared when no lamp was lit and no fire burned. They were described as flickering glows, faint but persistent, like distant fireflies trapped inside stone walls. Some accounts speak of cooks startled by the sight, only to find no source when they searched. Was it a trick of the embers? The reflection of moonlight slipping in through high windows? Or was it something else, something the palace never explained? You picture yourself standing in those kitchens centuries ago, pausing over a pan of simmering broth, only to see a shimmer glide along the wall, vanishing before you can focus. Perhaps it was harmless, nothing more than tired eyes playing games. But the records preserve the descriptions again and again, suggesting that more than one person saw them. They never caused harm, never spread fear, but their presence lingers. In writing like a small puzzle left unsolved, this mystery adds another layer to the night atmosphere. Midnight becomes more than just quiet. It becomes charged, alive with possibilities that daylight never reveals. The kitchens, stripped of the noise of service, become a stage where shadows, firelight, and imagination meet. You can almost hear the silence pulsing, as though the palace itself is whispering secrets to those patient enough to listen. If you are tired enough, maybe even the pots and pans start humming lullabies. Historically, these midnight labors were crucial. A court as vast as Versailles could not rely solely on daytime work. Preparations for a royal feast required timing that stretched across hours, sometimes days. Spices needed to rest in marinades overnight. Meats had to be turned and basted slowly, and bread dough was left to rise in the cool air of stone corridors. The cooks working at midnight carried responsibilities that few saw, but everyone tasted the next day. Their work was invisible, yet indispensable. You notice how this quiet persistence mirrors the feeling of the palace itself. So much effort hidden beneath grandeur, so many unseen details supporting the brilliance on display. The guests never thought about the hands that chopped herbs at 2 in the morning or checked ovens by candlelight. Yet those hands shaped the experience of the court, just as the stars shape the night sky. Anonymous, steady, uncelebrated, but essential dot as you let your mind drift, the kitchens become almost dreamlike. The faint glow of coals spreads across the floor like constellations fallen from the sky. A pot releases a thin curl of steam that twists upward, catching a sliver of moonlight through a high window. Somewhere a ladle rests against a pan, producing the faintest hum when the air shifts. The details are small, but together they create a gentle tapestry of sound and light, perfectly suited to the drowsy hour. And still, the thought of those unexplained glows returns. Perhaps they were illusions of smoke, or glimmers from metal, or perhaps they were simply the palace reminding its workers that history was watching. After all, Versailles was more than a building. It was an idea, a symbol, a living presence. Maybe at midnight, when the noise fell away, that presence became easier to feel. A soft flicker here, a glow there, as if the palace was winking at its most faithful servants. You imagine yourself as one of those attendants, pausing mid-task to rub your eyes, then shaking your head with a quiet smile. Whether or not the light was real, it gave you a moment to rest, to marvel, to feel that your work was part of something larger. Even in the deepest silence, there was beauty to be found. Even in the hardest labor, there was a kind of peace. And in the kitchens of Versailles, peace often came at midnight dot. Now the thought settles like ash, soft and weightless. Midnight in the kitchens is not just history. It is a lull, a reminder that stillness can live alongside effort, that mystery can live alongside order. As you breathe slowly, you feel as though the quiet glow of that long-vanished night lingers still. A flicker that needs no explanation, only your calm attention. The night lingers gently, and as you wander deeper into the kitchens, you notice a change in the air. The silence that wrapped the space now carries another companion, the rich, layered fragrance of roasting meats. It does not strike you all at once, but instead unfurls slowly, like warm fabric settling over cold stone. You breathe deeply, and with each breath you feel the aromas draw you further into the rhythm of the palace night dot at Versailles. The roasting of whole animals was a central part of court dining. Grand feasts required not only abundance, but spectacle, and nothing conveyed that sense of magnificence more than an entire bird or beast, carefully prepared and cooked before the eyes of the royal household. Records describe swans, peacocks, boars, and stags presented in their full form, each roasted until golden and carried out on massive platters. The sight was meant to dazzle, but the aroma alone could fill the corridors long before the meal began. Imagine the crackling sound of firewood giving way under the heat, and above it, the slow hiss of fat dripping into flames. The combination produced a rhythm like soft applause, steady and soothing, echoing faintly in the vaulted chambers. The cooks knew these sounds intimately, for they guided the roasting process as surely as any recipe. Too much hiss and the fire was too hot. Too little, and the meat risked drying out. Cooking at Versailles was as much music as craft, a symphony of small cues, repeated night after night. You pause and let yourself sink into that scent. It is dense and comforting, carrying hints of herbs rubbed into the skin, salt crusting the surface, and the faint sweetness of marinades seeping into the meat. Perhaps you smile at the thought that these aromas have no need for written language. They travel through the air, carrying messages of nourishment and celebration across centuries. Even the hungriest historian could fall asleep just imagining such scents, though perhaps they would dream of sneaking leftovers into a notebook. The practice of roasting whole animals demanded immense skill and coordination. Large spits turned, slowly, sometimes cranked by hand, other times using mechanisms powered by pulleys and weights. Attendants brushed the surfaces with oils and wine, ensuring even browning, while others kept the fires at the correct intensity. It was a performance, not only in the final presentation, but in every careful step along the way. The entire process could last hours, stretching deep into the night, requiring patience that few modern kitchens ever attempt. But within this grand tradition lies a mystery. Among the records of Versailles cuisine are references to marinades and seasonings used only for the largest roasts. Some notes describe sauces infused with ingredients that no longer appear in modern cooking, and a few recipes mention herbs or spices whose identity is uncertain. Several historians believe that entire methods of preparation have been lost, leaving only shadows of their presence. Imagine, then, a roast carrying flavors no one alive today could fully recognize, aromas that drifted through the palace and then vanished from history. You let this thought settle, and it feels both melancholy and soothing. The idea that some flavors are gone forever reminds you how fleeting all human creations can be. Yet at the same time, the memory of their existence lingers like faint perfume on old fabric. The lost marinades of Versailles are whispers from the past, asking you to appreciate what can still be imagined. Perhaps you chuckle quietly, wondering if future generations will speak in hushed tones about the mysterious seasoning of your favorite takeout. The longer you linger, the more layers emerge within the fragrance. It is not only the scent of meat over flame, but also wood smoke curling upward, herbs carried from faraway lands, and a faint sweetness hinting at honey or fruit glazes. Each note rises and fades in turn, as though the kitchen itself were drawing breath. With each inhale, you sense richness and abundance. With each exhale, a deep calm settles. The moment feels less like a meal and more like meditation. The cooks themselves must have found moments of serenity within the long labor. Turning a spit slowly through the midnight hours, brushing the same surface again and again, they surely sank into a rhythm of thoughtless concentration. The palace demanded perfection, but repetition has its own gift. It quiets the mind. Even while working, perhaps they felt the same tranquility that you feel now, wrapped in the perfume of their efforts. The history of Versailles feasts reminds you that food was never just sustenance, it was spectacle. To dine at the king's table was to take part in a carefully staged performance. Guests did not simply eat. They watched, admired, and judged each detail. Even before dishes were carried in, the fragrance of roasting meats and simmering sauces worked as part of the show. Scents drifted through corridors, teasing anticipation and declaring abundance. A guest might never set foot in the kitchens, yet the aromas alone spoke volumes. They proclaimed power and wealth more eloquently than words, as though the palace itself announced its splendor. One roasted stag at a time. Now you imagine standing in one of those kitchens, the fire low but steady, the spit turning slowly, and the fragrance wrapping around you like a blanket. It is impossible to hurry here. The process demands patience. The aromas refuse to be rushed, and your breathing naturally falls into step with the slow rhythm of roasting. You feel calmer, almost drowsy, as though the smell alone were enough to guide you toward rest. The lost recipes, the vanishing flavors, the slow music of fire and fat, these all become part of a dreamlike scene. You realize that Versailles at night was not always glittering with chandeliers and music. Sometimes its heartbeat in the kitchens, in the silence between footsteps, in the drifting clouds of smoke carrying mysteries no record could ever fully capture. And here, in the fragrance of roasting meats, the palace still speaks to you. The kitchens of Versailles were never silent, yet they were never unchanging. As your imagination wanders through their stone halls, you see how time itself dictated what arrived at the king's table. The passing of seasons shaped more than the gardens. It transformed flavors, aromas, and rituals. Winter demanded hearty roasts and warming stews, while summer called for lighter fare, fresh herbs, and cooling fruits. Autumn and spring brought their own transitions, each imprinting a unique rhythm on the palace menus. In this way, Versailles embodied not just grandeur, but the steady heartbeat of the earth's cycles. In the cold months, the air outside the palace was heavy, often filled with frost, and the kitchens responded with warmth. Meals grew denser, richer, designed to fortify both body and spirit. Great roasts, heavy sauces, and root vegetables simmered long into the night. The aroma of spiced wine and thick broths would hang in the air like a blanket, comforting and strong. Versailles in winter was a place where food seemed to hold the power to push back the cold. If only for a few hours at the grand table, summer told a very different story. The heat demanded lighter dishes, fresher flavors, and more delicate preparations. Salads of crisp greens, fruits glistening with dew, and tender fish replaced the roasts of winter. Citrus, imported at great cost, brought brightness to meals, cutting through the heaviness of courtly banquets. Even the kitchens themselves felt different. Fires burned lower, windows opened wider, and the air carried not the thick smell of roasting meats, but the gentler fragrance of herbs, lemons, and baked fruits. The cycle repeated every year, as regular as the sun's path across the sky. Yet within this rhythm, there were exceptions that remained mysteries. Some records speak of dishes that appeared only once each year, timed precisely to the turning of the season, then vanished until the same moment returned. These were not staples or daily comforts. They were fleeting offerings, as if meant to mark the passage of time itself. Scholars continue to wonder if these recipes were symbolic offerings. Perhaps they represented a gesture toward nature, an acknowledgement that even a king's table was bound to the earth's cycles. Or perhaps they were a form of theater, designed to remind guests that the palace could command not only wealth and labor, but the very seasons themselves. Whatever the reason, the ephemeral dishes whisper of a world where food was more than sustenance. It was ritual. You pause and imagine one such meal: a platter of glazed fruits served only on the first day of spring, or a spiced stew that appeared on the eve of winter. The flavors would be savored not only for taste, but for the knowledge that they would not return until the cycle allowed. Eating became a form of waiting, patience made edible. Each bite carried the weight of time passing, a reminder that nothing lasts forever, not even flavors at the king's table. The thought brings a quiet sense of comfort. In your own life, days often blur together, meals arrive and vanish without notice. Yet here, within the palace kitchens, eating was inseparable from the rhythms of nature. The court may have lived in glittering halls, yet they still felt the earths turning through the dishes placed before them. Each course reflected a season, each flavor a passing moment. Food became more than sustenance. It became clock and calendar, a gentle teacher reminding all who dined that life, in its grandeur and simplicity, moves in cycles. The cooks and attendants must have felt this deeply. Preparing winter's roasts required stamina, the handling of heavy meats, and the constant tending of fires. Preparing summer's feasts demanded delicacy, the careful balance of herbs and fruits that spoiled too quickly. Each season shaped their labor, and each left its imprint on the kitchen walls. Smoke from winter fires staining stone, sunlight in summer casting shifting patterns through open windows. Imagine walking into the kitchens at midsummer. The air is thick with warmth, but instead of roasts, you see bowls of fresh cherries, piles of herbs, baskets of fish packed in ice. The smell is sharp, refreshing, almost playful. Now shift to midwinter, the same space, but heavy with smoke. Copper pots bubbling with stews, the air dense and fragrant, carrying notes of meat, clove, and cinnamon. A palace may not speak in words, but through its kitchens it tells two very different stories. You smile at the thought that some dishes, now lost, once carried their own quiet secrets. Perhaps there was a tart baked only for Louis XIV's birthday, or a rare wine infusion prepared for a single feast. Why such creations disappeared, why the recipes never survived, remains a mystery. Were they too sacred to record, held close as private treasures? Or were they so commonplace that no one thought them worth preserving until fashions shifted and they slipped away? In the silence of the archives, their absence speaks as powerfully as the recipes that endure. There is a quiet comfort in realizing that the past guarded its own mysteries of taste. The vanished dishes will never meet your tongue, yet you can envision them, the colors bright on gilded plates, the aromas curling upward, the fleeting joy of flavors bound to their season. To imagine them is almost meditative, a way of honoring what cannot return. Just as Versailles once slowed its rhythm to follow the turning year, you too feel your breath ease, steadying into harmony with the eternal cycle of the seasons. Seasons passed, the kings came and went, but the memory of those shifting meals lingers. It is as if the palace itself still holds the echo of summer herbs, the ghost of winter roasts, the memory of spring fruits and autumn grains. And as you drift through these thoughts, you realize that the kitchens of Versailles were not only about feeding a court, they were about marking time, honoring cycles, and weaving history into every bite. The palace never truly slept, yet the kitchens sometimes felt as though they drifted into a dream of their own. You picture the stone walls standing still, long after laughter had faded from the gilded halls. Moonlight slipped through high windows, spilling across silent stoves, and the air carried only the softest remnants of spice and smoke. In that silver glow, the kitchen seemed less like a place of labor and more like a sanctuary of shadows. The great feasts of Versailles often stretched late into the night. Musicians played, dancers whirled, and candlelight glittered on gold leaf walls until even the most enthusiastic guests began to grow weary. By the time the last goblets were raised, the palace kitchens had already labored for hours beyond counting. Yet the work did not always end with the feast. Sometimes, as records quietly mention, the stoves glowed faintly even after the guests had retired. It is said that fires burned without attendants, as though the flames themselves resisted sleep. Copper pots gleamed faintly under the moonlight, their curves catching stray silver beams like mirrors. The tiled floors reflected shadows that moved gently, though no hand stirred the pots and no feet crossed the stones. This detail feels like a dream whispered through history impossible to prove, yet too curious to ignore. The fact remains. The feasts often ended well past midnight. Servants and cooks cleaned, sorted, and stacked, yet for reasons never explained. There are notes in old inventories that mention glowing embers lasting until dawn, long after the last human hand had left the room. Who tended those fires, if anyone? Who kept the stoves alive when the palace itself had fallen quiet? The idea brings a quiet smile to your lips. Perhaps the stoves were like stubborn guests, unwilling to leave even after the party ended. Perhaps the copper pots themselves enjoyed one last hour of warmth before surrendering to the night. The thought is almost comical, like imagining a pot tapping its lid impatiently, unwilling to cool down. You picture the moonlight touching everything, the knives resting on wooden boards, the shelves of spices in their jars, the soot-darkened bricks above the fireplaces. Every object becomes softer, transformed by the silvery light into something almost gentle. The harsh clatter of work is gone, replaced with silence so deep that even a faint ember seems to hum. Some historians note that palace celebrations could stretch until 3 or 4 in the morning. After such gatherings, the kitchens were expected to be spotless, ready for whatever morning required. The staff worked tirelessly, yet the mystery remains. Why did some stoves stay lit? Why did this glow persist beyond the hands of labor? Perhaps a cook, exhausted, simply forgot. Perhaps a pot was left warm for the next day's broth. Yet the repetition of this detail, fires glowing unattended, suggests something else. Was it a superstition, a deliberate choice to keep one stove alive, as if the warmth itself protected the palace? Or was it only coincidence, written down by tired scribes who found poetry in a lingering flame. You let your thoughts wander further. Imagine stepping quietly into the kitchen at 2 in the morning. The rest of the palace is asleep, the halls hushed. You open a door, and there it is, a single stove glowing softly, the fire inside small, but steady. No one is present, yet the warmth embraces you. It is as though the fire has chosen to remain awake, a silent guardian keeping time until dawn. The mystery deepens when you recall how many hidden corners the kitchens contained. Small passages, narrow stairways, doors leading to courtyards and chambers. Could someone have slipped in, stoked the fire, and left without record? Or was the ember glow truly untended, an echo of a day's labor refusing to fade? You may never know, and yet the question itself soothes you, like a lullaby sung in the language of wonder. The moonlight plays its role too. On some nights, it must have poured through high windows, painting long pale stripes across the stone floors. The contrast between the silver of the moon and the red of glowing coals creates a picture almost painterly, a still life in light and shadow. You imagine standing there, the coolness of night air rushing against your face while the stove's heat lingers on your skin. A balance of opposites, water and fire, silence and warmth. The palace above was full of grandeur, but here in the alley, quiet kitchens, the beauty was simpler, humbler. A single ember glowing could seem as meaningful as a chandelier of candles. Sometimes stillness tells more than sound, and in those hours between midnight and dawn, the kitchens whispered their quietest stories. The thought makes you chuckle softly. Imagine a courtier, wrapped in fine silks, wandering down for a midnight snack, only to find a lone fire waiting like an old friend. Perhaps they warmed their hands, stole a piece of bread, and returned upstairs without a word. History would not record such a moment, but the possibility feels oddly believable. You drift further into this vision, feeling how time slows when moonlight enters the scene. The pace of the palace stops racing. The great cycles of feasts and labor pause, leaving behind only the hum of silence and the stubborn glow of fire. It is not a story of kings and queens, but of coals and shadows, of pots gleaming softly under the gaze of the moon dot. As you rest in this thought, you realize that not everything about history is meant to be solved. Some things remain mysteries, not because answers are missing, but because questions themselves are enough. The glowing stoves of Versailles are such a mystery, half fact, half dream, a perfect companion for quiet nights like this. And so you let the vision linger. Moonlight falling across empty tables, fires glowing faintly as though breathing in. Their sleep and silence wrapping the kitchen like a blanket. The palace is still, but the warmth of the stoves carries through the night, gentle, patient, waiting for dawn. The kitchens of Versailles did not run on chance. Every movement, every task, every sound seemed to belong to a greater pattern, carefully arranged to keep the palace supplied with food and drink. You imagine walking through the halls, seeing not chaos, but a quiet choreography. Servants carried trays, cooks stirred pots, and stewards recorded lists. Each role fit like a piece of a clock, and the clock never missed its hour. The scale was remarkable. Hundreds of mouths had to be fed every day, from the royal family to courtiers, attendants, guards, and visitors. The kitchens functioned as an engine behind the glamour of Versailles. Without the precision of that engine, the grand feasts and daily meals would have collapsed into confusion. The system was so detailed that even deliveries of bread or water were timed and checked, ensuring that nothing disrupted the rhythm. This precision reflected the philosophy of the palace itself. Louis XIV, who transformed Versailles into a symbol of royal power, demanded order not only in ceremonies, but also in the hidden work that supported them. The kitchens mirrored the symmetry of the gardens outside, paths of labor, designed like paths of flowers, both serving beauty in their own way. you picture rows of shelves perfectly stacked, knives aligned on boards, spices arranged by importance. It was not merely about function, but about presenting harmony. A visitor might not have entered the kitchens often, yet if they did, the impression would have been one of discipline, not disorder. Even the copper pots, when not in use, shone from constant polishing, lined up in order as though standing in formation. The thought makes you smile. Imagine a cook scolding an apprentice, not because the dish was wrong, but because a spoon leaned slightly to the left. It is a comic picture, yet one that probably held some truth. At Versailles, even the smallest details mattered, because small details reflected the image of the crown. Behind the visible order, however, lies a curious mystery. Old notes mention a secondary kitchen, sometimes referred to as a hidden space where additional work was done. No record has revealed exactly where it was, or why it was kept separate. Some have speculated it was for preparing food in secret, perhaps dishes meant for private consumption by the king or queen. Others think it may have been a backup, kept ready in case of fire or shortage. Yet to this day, no one has confirmed its exact location. You let your imagination play with the idea. Perhaps it was tucked behind a false wall or down a stairway that has since been sealed. Perhaps a few servants alone knew its doors, entering quietly while the main kitchens buzzed with noise. There is a certain charm in picturing such a place, an invisible rhythm hidden inside the visible rhythm, like a melody under the main song. The very existence of this rumor shows how carefully the palace balanced visibility and secrecy. Versailles was built to impress, but it was also built to function. The kitchens demonstrated this dual nature. On the surface, everything gleamed with order. Yet behind the surfaces, there may have been hidden rooms, hidden fires, hidden hands preparing meals that never appeared on the official lists. Walking slowly in your thoughts, you notice how the corridors of stone seem to echo not just with footsteps, but with structure itself. The building whispers of planning. Air moves gently through windows placed at precise heights. Floors are set at levels that ease the carrying of trays. Even silence becomes part of the order, as though the walls themselves guide the servants into a steady pace. It is comforting in its way. To see such order is to feel steadiness, as though the world will not collapse because someone has already thought of what needs to be done. The palace kitchens offered not only food, but reassurance that life would proceed according to rhythm. Perhaps that is why courtiers rarely thought about the work behind their meals. They trusted in the invisible system, the unseen care that ensured their plates were full. The mystery of the secondary kitchen returns, though, lingering like a whisper. Why mention it at all if it did not exist? Why record it in inventories and notes, only to let its location vanish? It becomes a puzzle you cannot solve, but can enjoy holding in your mind. A palace as vast as Versailles might easily hide one. More room, one more chamber where order was maintained in secret. As you stand in this imagined space, the quiet discipline of the kitchens begins to feel like meditation. Every knife placed correctly, every pot returned to its shelf, every spice jar labeled in script, all of it reflects attention to the present moment. Centuries later, the traces remain. Even in silence, you can sense the alignment, the care, the respect for routine. The thought brings a gentle laugh. Imagine if modern kitchens tried the same level of order, with shelves labeled for carrots only and spoons polished daily. Most of us would give up after a week. Yet at Versailles, it was simply expected. Discipline became part of daily life, woven into the rhythm of work like thread in a tapestry. As the night deepens, you picture the kitchens resting after a day of labor. Tools are cleaned, fires dimmed, floors swept. The order remains, even without movement. It is as though the very stones carry memory, holding the weight of centuries of structured care. The palace above may glitter with music and dance, but down here, The true elegance lies in stillness and arrangement. Perhaps that is the lasting secret of Versailles. Not only the grand halls or fountains, but the quiet discipline that held everything together, order in every detail, harmony in every gesture, a rhythm that made magnificence possible. And though one hidden kitchen may never be found, its echo reminds you that sometimes the most meaningful patterns are the ones unseen. You breathe slowly, imagining knives glinting faintly, jars lined in perfect rows, and fires finally extinguished. The kitchens are still, yet their order lives on, an invisible music playing gently through the centuries. You walk slowly across the flagstone floor, where the echo of your steps seems to fall into an ocean of stillness. The feast has ended. Plates have been cleared, laughter and music have drifted away, and what remains is silence vast, steady, profound. Only hours ago, these kitchens roared with urgency, fires blazing, copper pots rattling under the hands of cooks who moved with practiced rhythm. Now that life has dissolved, what lingers in the air is not noise but memory, softened into faint traces of smoke and spice that hover like ghosts above the stones. Copper pots, lined neatly in their rows, cool in the dim light. Once they held bubbling sauces and simmering broths, flames licking their bases with impatient hunger. Now they are quiet, their surfaces dulling as shadows slide over their curves. Each pot seems to carry its own history, a vessel not just of food but of time itself. You notice how the last warmth radiates from them gently, fading like the final. Notes of a lullaby. Fires that once roared with purpose now rest as faint embers, surrendering at last to the night. Nearby, candles sputter, their flames bowing lower and lower. The wax drips in slow, deliberate trails, collecting in soft pools. Along the bases, each flicker sends light trembling across the stone, and with every moment, the glow weakens, until only faint points remain like scattered stars caught indoors. Soon, they too will falter, leaving only memory in their place. Darkness does not rush here. It seeps in gently, like water filling a basin. You pause beside a long wooden table. The knives have been returned to their resting place, their edges catching the last light in thin, tired glimmers. Chopping blocks are cleared, their surfaces smooth but scarred, each mark a trace of past labor. Wooden boards, polished by years, of hands and blades, sit calm and still, no longer burdened by the endless demands of meals that seem to have no end. Even the tools feel as if they are exhaling, relieved of duty, resting with dignity in the quiet dot as you continue. You hear the soft creak of beams above, the timbers adjusting to the cool of night. Beyond that sound, there is nothing. The energy that once filled every corner has been replaced by sanctuary. Corridors stretch longer in silence. Shadows settle deeper, and each step you take feels heavier, carrying the weight of centuries. You think of how, after the French Revolution, this silence became not only a pause, but a permanence. Many of the kitchens were abandoned, their fires never relit. Doors were locked, rooms forgotten, and what had once been the beating heart of Versailles was left to slumber. Above, the palace endured in grandeur, its mirrored halls and gilded salons preserved for history. But below, entire chambers slipped quietly into neglect, hidden away like memories too fragile to disturb. And here lies another mystery. Records. Mention rooms sealed during that time, their doors closed in haste, their contents left behind. No one knows what they held. Were shelves lined with forgotten spices? Were old tools abandoned mid-task, recipes scribbled half-finished? Or were they simply empty, nothing more than stone and shadow? The truth is locked away, perhaps forever. You imagine a heavy door just beyond reach, its iron cold against stone, its silence thicker than the rest. Some secrets, it seems, choose to remain untold. This thought brings a soft smile. Palace so vast as Versailles surely has room for secrets, and perhaps it is fitting that some remain hidden. Mystery itself becomes part of the palace's story, as essential as any feast or ceremony. Like an unplayed note in music, what is left unsaid gives shape to everything around it. You walk again through the kitchens, noticing how the air has shifted. Earlier, the rooms carried the pulse of work, the rhythm of knives and footsteps, the heat of fire pressing outward. Now, the atmosphere feels lighter, as though the walls themselves are breathing out, finally released from the burden of constant demand. The banquet above may still echo faintly with music, but down here, the night has already settled into completion. A final candle dies, its flame collapsing into a thread of smoke. Darkness folds around you like a cloak, not oppressive but tender, embracing rather than overwhelming. The stones beneath your feet are cool, the air still, the silence complete. In this quiet, time itself seems to pause. There is no urgency, no duty, no expectation. Only calm. You draw in a slow breath and let your mind drift across centuries. Kings and queens, cooks and attendants, all of them passed through these very chambers, their lives marked by urgency, their steps recorded in the air. Now, all are gone, their voices dissolved into silence. What remains is rhythm, not of labor, but of stillness, eternal and patient. It is the same silence you hear now, carrying the weight of history, and yet lifting it at the same time. And so, the story draws gently to an end. The Versailles kitchens lie quiet now, their fires long extinguished, their tools set aside, their chambers wrapped in shadow. Where once there was motion and heat, only calm remains. The roar of labor has softened into silence, offering a final reminder. No matter how splendid the feast, it must fade, and even the busiest rooms must finally surrender to peace. Let your mind rest in this silence. Picture the gleam of copper cooling, the smooth weight of stone, the air heavy but serene. Imagine the locked rooms, their secrets folded away in darkness, never demanding, never urgent. Let them stand as symbols of patience, of stillness, of the quiet beauty that follows when activity fades. Your breath slows, your body eases. Your thoughts soften like embers, cooling into ash. In this moment, the palace exhales, and you find yourself exhaling with it. There is no need to go further. You are already here, in the stillness after the feast. Good night, sleep well, and see you again. End of script. Thank you for listening, everyone.